Welcome back to Footnotes and Folly, and to Herodotus. I am Pemberton. This is part 14. Cambyses has come back from the desert empty-handed, and finds Egypt rejoicing over the appearance of a new sacred bull, and something in him snaps. Watch, if you can bear it, the descent. He stabs the god Apis, kills his own brother over a dream, kills his sister wife, and shoots a courtier's son through the heart to prove he is not mad, which rather settles the question. Then Herodotus, with his usual mercy, carries us away to sunny Samos, and to Polycrates, the most fortunate tyrant who ever lived, so fortunate that his wise friend Amasis grew frightened of it, over a ring and a fish. Let us continue.
After the spies had seen everything, they departed to return. When they reported these things, Cambyses was immediately enraged and began to march his army against the Ethiopians. He had not ordered any provision of food, nor had he considered that he meant to lead an army to the furthest ends of the earth. Instead, like a man who was mad and not in his right mind, as soon as he heard the report of the Ichthyophagoi, he began to march. He ordered the Hellenes who were present to remain behind in Egypt, and took with him his whole land force. In the course of the march, when he had arrived at Thebes, he separated about 50,000 men from his army and ordered them to enslave the Ammonians and burn the seat of the oracle of Zeus. He himself, with the rest of the army, continued against the Ethiopians. But before the army had passed even the fifth part of the way, all their provisions were completely gone. After the provisions, the beasts of burden also were eaten up and came to an end. If Cambyses, when he perceived this, had changed his plan and led his army back, he would have been a wise man despite his first mistake. As it was, however, he paid no attention and kept going forward without stopping. The soldiers, as long as they could get anything from the ground, prolonged their lives by eating grass. But when they came to the sand, some of them committed a dreadful act. Out of each group of 10, they selected one of their own number by lot and devoured him. When Cambyses heard of it, he was alarmed by this eating of one another, gave up the expedition against the Ethiopians, and set out to return. He arrived at Thebes after losing a great number of his army. Then from Thebes he came down to Memphis and allowed the Hellenes to sail away home. So the expedition against the Ethiopians ended in this way. As for the Persians who had been sent to march against the Ammonians, they set out from Thebes and went on their way with guides. It is known that they reached the city of Oasis, which is inhabited by Samians said to be of the Assyrian tribe, and is 7 days' journey from Thebes across the sandy desert. In the speech of the Hellenes, this place is called the Isle of the Blessed. It is said that the army reached this place, but from that point onward, except for the Ammonians themselves, and those who have heard the account from them, no one is able to say anything about them. They neither reached the Ammonians nor returned. The Ammonians themselves add this to the story. They say that as the army was going from this oasis through the sandy desert to attack them, and had come to about the halfway point between the oasis and the Ammonians, while they were taking their morning meal, a violent south wind blew upon them. Carrying heaps of desert sand with it, the wind buried them under the sand, and in this way they disappeared, and were never seen again. This is what the Ammonians say happened to that army. When Cambyses arrived at Memphis, Apis appeared to the Egyptians, whom the Hellenes call Epaphus. As soon as he appeared, the Egyptians put on their finest garments and held festivities. Cambyses saw the Egyptians doing this, and supposed that they were certainly acting in this way, because they were rejoicing over his misfortune. So he called for the officers who had charge of Memphis. When they came into his presence, he asked them why the Egyptians had done nothing like this when he was at Memphis before, but were doing it only now, after he had returned there having lost a large part of his army. They answered that a god had appeared to them, one who was accustomed to appear only at long intervals, and that whenever he appeared, all the Egyptians rejoiced and kept festival. Hearing this, Cambyses said they were lying, and as liars he condemned them to death. After putting these men to death, he next called the priests into his presence. When the priests gave him the same answer, he said that if a tame god had come to the Egyptians, it would not happen without his knowing it. Having said this, he ordered the priests to bring Apis into his presence, and they went to bring him. Now this Apis Epaphos is a calf born from a cow who afterward is not allowed to conceive any other offspring. The Egyptians say that a flash of light comes down from heaven upon this cow, and from this she gives birth to Apis. The calf called Apis is black and has the following signs: a white square on the forehead, on the back the likeness of an eagle, double hairs in the tail, and on the tongue a mark like a beetle. O wretched creatures, are gods born like this, with blood and flesh, and able to feel the stroke of iron weapons? Such a god is indeed worthy of Egyptians. But you at least shall not escape punishment for making a mock of me. When the priests brought Apis, Cambyses, being somewhat affected with madness, drew his dagger and aimed at the belly of Apis, but struck his thigh. Then he laughed and spoke to the priests. After speaking, he ordered those whose duty it was to do such things to scourge the priests without mercy, and to put to death any of the other Egyptians whom they found keeping the festival. Thus the festival of the Egyptians was brought to an end, the priests were punished, and Apis, wounded by the stroke in his thigh, lay dying in the temple. When Apis had ended his life because of the wound, the priests buried him without Cambyses' knowledge. But Cambyses, as the Egyptians say, immediately after this evil deed became completely mad, though even before that time he had not truly been in his right mind. The first of his evil deeds was that he put to death his brother Smerdis, who had the same father and mother as himself. Cambyses had sent this brother away from Egypt to Persia out of envy, because Smerdis alone of all the Persians had been able to draw the bow which the ichthyophagoi brought from the Ethiopian king, to the extent of about 2 finger breadths. Not one of the other Persians had been able to do this. After Smerdis had gone away to Persia, Cambyses saw a vision in his sleep. It seemed to him that a messenger came from Persia and reported that Smerdis, sitting on the royal throne, had touched heaven with his head. Fearing from this that his brother might kill him and reign in his place, Cambyses sent Prixastes to Persia, the man whom he trusted most of all the Persians, with orders to kill him. Prixastes went up to Susa and killed Smerdis. Some say he took him out hunting and killed him there. Others say he brought him to the Erythraean Sea and drowned him. They say this was the first beginning of the evil deeds of Cambyses. Next after this, he put to death his sister, who had accompanied him to Egypt, and to whom he was also married, though she was his sister by both parents. He had taken her as his wife in the following way, for before this the Persians had not been accustomed at all to marry their sisters. Cambyses fell in love with one of his sisters and desired to take her as his wife. Since he intended to do what was not customary, he called the royal judges and asked them whether there was any law that permitted a man who wished to do so to marry his sister. The royal judges are men chosen from among the Persians, and they hold office until they die, unless some injustice is found in them, and no longer. They pronounce judgments for the Persians, explain the ordinances of their fathers, and all matters are referred to them. So when Cambyses asked them, they gave him an answer that was both upright and safe. They said that they found no law allowing a brother to marry his sister, but apart from that they had found a law saying that the king of the Persians might do whatever he desired. In this way, on the one hand, they did not tamper with the law out of fear of Cambyses, and at the same time, so that they would not perish themselves by upholding the law, they found another law, besides the one asked about, in favor of the man who wished to marry his sisters. So Cambyses at that time took his wife the sister with whom he was in love, and not long afterward he took another sister as well. It was the younger of these whom he put to death, the one who had accompanied him to Egypt. About her death as about the death of Smerdis, 2 different stories are told. The Hellenes say that Cambyses had matched a lion's cub in fight against a puppy, and that this wife of his was also watching. When the puppy was being overcome, another puppy, its brother, broke its chain and came to help it. When there were 2 puppies instead of 1, they got the better of the cub. Cambyses was pleased by the sight, but his wife, sitting beside him, began to weep. Cambyses noticed this and asked why she was crying. She said she had wept when she saw the puppy come to the help of its brother, because she remembered Smerdis and understood that there was no one who would come to his help. The Hellenes say that Cambyses killed her because of this saying. But the Egyptians say that while they were sitting around at table, his wife took a lettuce, pulled off its leaves all around, and then asked her husband whether the lettuce was more beautiful when stripped in this way or when covered with leaves. He answered, when covered with leaves. Then she spoke to him. Nevertheless, you once made the likeness of this lettuce, when you stripped bare the house of Cyrus. Moved to anger, he leapt upon her while she was pregnant, and she miscarried and died. These were the acts of madness Cambyses committed against his own family, whether the madness was really produced because of Apis or from some other cause, as many ills are apt to seize upon men. It is also said that Cambyses had from birth a certain grievous sickness, what some call the sacred disease. It was certainly nothing strange that when the body was suffering from a grievous sickness, the mind too should not be sound. The following also are acts of madness, which he committed against the other Persians. To Prixastes, the man whom he honored most and who used to carry his messages, whose son also was cup-bearer to Cambyses, which was no small honor, it is said that he spoke as follows. Prixastes, what kind of man do the Persians consider me to be, and what do they say about me? Master, in all other respects you are greatly praised, but they say that you are too much given to the love of wine. Thus Prixastes spoke about the Persians. This Cambyses was roused to anger and answered that it appeared the Persians were saying he was given to wine, and therefore was beside himself and not in his right mind, and that their earlier speech then had not been sincere. For before this time, it seems, when the Persians and Croesus were sitting with him in council, Cambyses asked what kind of man they thought he was in comparison with his father Cyrus. They answered that he was better than his father, because he not only possessed everything his father had possessed, but had also acquired Egypt and the sea in addition. So the Persians spoke. But Croesus, who was present and was not satisfied with their judgment, spoke to Cambyses. To me, O son of Cyrus, you do not seem equal to your father, for you do not yet have such a son as he left behind in you. Hearing this, Cambyses was pleased and commended the judgment of Croesus. Remembering this, Cambyses spoke angrily to Prixastes. Now learn for yourself whether the Persians speak the truth, or whether they themselves are out of their senses when they say this. If I shoot at your son, who is standing there before the entrance of the chamber, and hit him in the very middle of the heart, the Persians will be proved to be speaking falsely. But if I miss, then you may say that the Persians are speaking the truth, and that I am not in my right mind. After saying this, Cambyses drew his bow and struck the boy. When the boy had fallen, it is said that Cambyses ordered them to cut open his body and examine the place where he had been hit. When the arrow was found fixed in the heart, he laughed and was delighted, and spoke to the boy's father. Breaks asks, "It has now been made clear, as you see, that I am not mad, but that the Persians are out of their senses. Now tell me, whom among all men have you ever seen before this time hit the mark so well in shooting?" "Master, I think that not even God himself could have hit the mark so fairly." So Cambyses acted at that time. At another time, on a charge of no importance, he condemned 12 Persians, men equal to the best, and buried them alive with their heads downward. While he was doing these things, Croesus the Lydian judged it right to admonish him. "O king, do not indulge the heat of your youth and passion in everything, but restrain and hold yourself back. It is a good thing to be prudent, and forethought is wise. You are putting to death men of your own people, condemning them on charges of no importance, and you are putting men's sons to death also. If you do many such things, beware lest the Persians revolt from you. As for me, your father Cyrus entrusted me with a charge, earnestly ordering me to admonish you and suggest to you whatever I should find to be good." Thus Croesus counseled him, showing goodwill toward him. But Cambyses answered him, "Do you dare to counsel me, you who ruled your own country so excellently, and who counseled my father so well, telling him to cross the river Araxes and go against the Massagete, when they were willing to cross into our land? You utterly ruined yourself by your bad rule over your own land, and you utterly ruined Cyrus, who followed your counsel. Yet you shall not escape punishment now, for know that before this I had long been wishing to find some occasion against you." After saying this, Cambyses took his bow, meaning to shoot him, but Croesus sprang up and ran out. Since Cambyses could not shoot him, he ordered his attendants to seize and kill him. The attendants, however, knowing his moods, hid Croesus. They intended that if Cambyses changed his mind and wanted Croesus back, they could produce him and receive gifts as the price of saving his life, but if he did not change his mind or desire him back, then they could kill him. Not long afterward Cambyses did in fact desire to have Croesus again, and the attendants, perceiving this, reported to him that Croesus was still alive. Cambyses said that he rejoiced with Croesus that he was alive, but that those who had preserved him would not escape freely. He would put them to death. And so he did. He committed many such acts of madness against Persians and allies, while he remained at Memphis, opening ancient tombs and examining the dead bodies. Likewise he entered the temple of Hephaestus and greatly mocked the image of the god. The image of Hephaestus closely resembles the Phoenician patikoi, which the Phoenicians carry on the prows of their triremes. For anyone who has not seen these, I will describe its nature. It is the likeness of a dwarfish man. Cambyses also entered the temple of the Cabaroi, into which no one may lawfully enter except the priest alone, and after mocking the images there at length, he even set them on fire. These images too are like the images of Hephaestus, and they are said to be the children of that god. It is clear to me therefore by every kind of proof that Cambyses was exceedingly mad. Otherwise he would not have tried to mock religious rites and customary observances. For if one were to propose a choice to all men, bidding them select the best customs from all the customs that exist, each race of men, after examining them all, would choose those of his own people. Thus all men think their own customs are by far the best. So it is not likely that anyone but a madman would make a jest of such things. That all men are accustomed to think this way about their customs may be judged from many other proofs, and especially from the following. In the course of his reign, Darius summoned the Hellenes who were present in his land and asked them for what price they would consent to eat their fathers after they died. They answered that they would not do it for any price. After this, Darius summoned those Indians called Calations, who eat their parents, and in the presence of the Hellenes, who understood what was said through an interpreter, asked them for what payment they would consent to burn the bodies of their fathers when they died. They cried out loudly, and told him to keep silent from such words. These things, then, are established by custom, and I think Pindar spoke rightly in his verse when he said that law is king of all things. Now while Cambyses was marching against Egypt, the Lacedaemonians had also made an expedition against Samos and against Polycrates son of Aix, who had risen against the government and obtained rule over Samos. At first Polycrates had divided the state into 3 parts, and had given shares to his brothers Pantagnotos and Silason. Later he put one of these to death, drove out the younger, Silason, and so gained possession of all Samos. Once in possession, he made a guest, friendship with Amasis king of Egypt, sending him gifts and receiving gifts from him in return. After this, in a short time, the power of Polycrates increased rapidly, and its fame spread not only in Ionia, but also through the rest of Hellas. Wherever he directed his forces, everything went fortunately for him. He had acquired 150 oared galleys and 1,000 archers, and he plundered everyone without distinction. He used to say that he would gain more gratitude from a friend by giving back what he had taken than by not taking it at all. So he conquered many of the islands and many cities on the mainland. Among other things, he won a sea battle over the Lesbians when they were coming with their forces to help the Milesians, and he conquered them. These men, working in chains, dug the whole trench around the wall of the city of Samos. Now Amasis, as may be supposed, did not fail to perceive that Polycrates was enjoying very great good fortune, and this troubled him. As still more good fortune continued to come to Polycrates, Amasis wrote these words on a paper and sent them to Samos. Amasis speaks thus to Polycrates: "It is indeed pleasant to hear that a friend and guest is faring well. Yet your great good fortune is not pleasing to me, because I know that the divinity is jealous. I desire, both for myself and for those about whom I care, that in some of our affairs we should prosper and in others fail, and so pass through life faring well and badly by turns, rather than be prosperous in everything. For I have never yet heard of anyone who was prosperous in all things, and did not come to an utterly evil end at last. Now therefore follow my counsel and act as I shall say with regard to your prosperous fortunes. Think carefully and consider which of your possessions you value most, and for the loss of which you would be most vexed in your soul. Take that thing and cast it away in such a manner that it shall never again come into the sight of men. If from that time onward good fortune does not befall you in alternation with calamities, apply remedies in the manner I have suggested." Polycrates read this, and after reflection perceived that Amasis was giving him good counsel. He sought to discover which of his treasures would grieve his soul most if he lost it, and in searching he found the following. He had a signet which he used to wear, set in gold and made of emerald stone. It was the work of Theodorus, son of Telecles of Samos. Since he thought it good to cast this away, he did as follows. He manned a 5-oared galley with sailors, and went aboard himself. Then he ordered them to put out into the deep sea. When he had got far from the island, he took off the signet ring, and in the sight of all who were with him in the ship, threw it into the sea. After doing this he sailed home, and when he came to his house he mourned for his loss. But on the 5th or 6th day after these things, the following happened to him. A fisherman caught a large and beautiful fish and thought it right that it should be given as a gift to Polycrates. He carried it to the door of the palace, and said that he wished to come into the presence of Polycrates. When he had obtained this, he gave him the fish and spoke. "O king, when I caught this fish, I did not think it fitting to carry it to the market, although I am a man who lives by the labor of his hands. Instead it seemed to me worthy of you and of your monarchy. Therefore I bring it and present it to you. You have done exceedingly well, and double thanks are due to you both for your words and for your gift. We invite you to come to dinner." The fisherman, thinking this a great thing, went away to his house. As the servants were cutting up the fish, they found in its belly the signet ring of Polycrates. As soon as they had seen it and taken it up, they carried it rejoicing to Polycrates, and as they gave him the signet ring they told him how it had been found. Polycrates, perceiving that the matter was from God, wrote on paper everything he had done and everything that had happened to him, and after writing it he sent it to Egypt. When Amasis read the paper that had come from Polycrates, he perceived that it was impossible for one man to rescue another from the event that was destined to happen. He understood that Polycrates was not destined to have a good end, since he was prosperous in all things, and had found again even the thing he had cast away. Therefore Amasis sent an envoy to him in Samos and said that he broke off the guest's friendship. He did this so that when a fearful and great misfortune befell Polycrates, he himself might not be grieved in his soul as he would be for a man who was his guest. It was against this Polycrates, prosperous in all things, that the Lacedaemonians were making an expedition, invited to come to the aid of those Samians who afterwards settled at Cydonia and Crete. Polycrates, without the knowledge of the Samians, had sent an envoy to Cambyses, son of Cyrus, while Cambyses was gathering an army to go against Egypt, and had asked him to send to Samos and request an armed force. Hearing this, Cambyses very readily sent to Samos and asked Polycrates to send a naval force with him against Egypt. Polycrates selected from among the citizens those whom he most suspected of wanting to rise against him, and sent them away in 40 triremes, instructing Cambyses not to send them back. Some say that the Samians who were sent away by Polycrates never reached Egypt. According to this account, when they arrived on their voyage at Carpathos, they considered the matter among themselves and resolved not to sail any farther. Others say that they reached Egypt, but that while they were being kept under guard there, they escaped from that place. Then, as they were sailing into Samos, Polycrates met them with ships and fought a battle with them. Those who were returning home got the better of him and landed on the island, but after fighting a land battle on the island, they were defeated, and so they sailed to Lacedaemon. Some say that those returning from Egypt defeated Polycrates in the battle, but in my opinion this is not correct. There would have been no need for them to invite the help of the Lacedaemonians, if they had been able by themselves to bring Polycrates to terms. Nor is it reasonable to suppose that Polycrates, who had very many foreign mercenaries and native archers, was defeated by the returning Samians, who were only few in number. Then Polycrates gathered together the children and wives of his subjects and confined them in the ship sheds, keeping them ready so that, if it should turn out that his subjects deserted to the side of the returning exiles, he could burn them together with the sheds. When the Samians who had been driven out by Polycrates reached Sparta, they were brought before the magistrates and spoke at length, earnestly pressing their request. At their first appearance, however, the magistrates answered that they had forgotten what had been said at the beginning and did not understand what had been said at the end. After this the Samians were brought in a second time, and this time they brought a bag with them and said nothing except that the bag was in need of meal. The Spartans replied that they had overdone it with the bag. Nevertheless, they resolved to help them. Then the Lacedaemonians prepared a force and made an expedition to Samos. Samians say this was in repayment for former services, because the Samians had first helped the Lacedaemonians with ships against the Messenians. But the Lacedaemonians say that they made the expedition not so much from a desire to help the Samians at their request, but rather to take vengeance on their own behalf for the robbery of the mixing bowl which they had been carrying as a gift to Croesus, and also of the corslet which Amasis, king of Egypt, had sent to them as a gift. The Samians had carried off the corslet too, in the year before they took the bowl. It was made of linen, with many figures woven into it and embroidered with gold and cotton. Each thread of this corslet is worthy of admiration, because although it is itself fine, it contains 360 fibers, all plainly visible. Another corslet like this is the one that Amasis dedicated as an offering to Athene at Lindos. The Corinthians also took part eagerly in this expedition against Samos so that it would be carried out. There had also been an offense committed against them by the Samians a generation before the time of this expedition, at about the same time as the robbery of the bull. Periander son of Kypselos had sent 300 sons of the leading men of Corcyra to Aliots at Sardis to be made eunuchs. When the Corinthians who were conducting the boys put in at Samos, the Samians learned the story and the purpose for which the boys were being taken to Sardis. First they instructed the boys to lay hold of the temple of Artemis. Then they refused to allow the Corinthians to drag the suppliants away from the temple. When the Corinthians cut the boys off from supplies of food, the Samians established a festival, which they still celebrate in the same way to the present time. When night came, as long as the boys were suppliants, they arranged dances of maidens and youths. In arranging the dances they made it a rule of the festival that sweet cakes made of sesame and honey should be carried, so that the Corcyraean boys might snatch them and have food to sustain themselves. This went on so long that at last the Corinthians who had charge of the boys departed and went away. As for the boys, the Samians carried them back to Corcyra. If after the death of Periander, the Corinthians had been on friendly terms with the Corcyraeans, they would not have joined in the expedition against Samos for the cause just mentioned. But as it is, ever since they first colonized the island, they have always been at variance with one another. This, then, was the reason why the Corinthians bore a grudge against the Samians. Periander had chosen the sons of the leading men of Corcyra, and was sending them to Sardis to be made eunuchs in order to take revenge, because the Corcyraeans had first begun the offense, and had done him an act of reckless wrong. After Periander killed his wife Melissa, it happened that he experienced another misfortune in addition to the one that had already come upon him. It was as follows. He had 2 sons by Melissa, one 17 years old and the other 18. Their mother's father, Proclus, who was despot of Epidaurus, sent for them and kindly entertained them, as was to be expected since they were the sons of his own daughter. When he was sending them back, he spoke to them as he took leave of them. "Do you know, boys, who it was that killed your mother?" The elder son paid no attention to this saying, but the younger, whose name was Lycophron, was so deeply grieved when he heard it that, when he returned to Corinth, he would neither address his father, nor speak to him when his father wished to converse with him, nor give any reply when Periander asked him questions, because he regarded him as the murderer of his mother. At last Periander, becoming enraged with his son, drove him out of his house.
And we will halt there, with Polycrates riding his impossible luck, his discarded ring come home in the belly of a fish, and the Spartan and Corinthian fleet now bearing down on Samos to pull him off his throne. Next time, in part 15, how the siege ends, how 2 brothers you have never heard of stole the whole Persian Empire while Cambyses raged in Egypt, and how Cambyses paid for his brother's blood. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.